Self-Realization Mastery. Published by Viridian. Chapter 1, Introduction. There is a quiet moment that arrives for most of us, sometimes sudden, sometimes creeping like dusk. We look at our life and feel a small, persistent ache, as if something essential is missing. It's not the ache of hunger or exhaustion. It is the ache of unrealized possibility. The person in the mirror is wearing your face, walking your days, keeping your calendar full, and yet you feel slightly out of tune with who you might be. That sensation is a beginning of self-realization. It is not a failure or a problem to fix. It is an invitation. Self-realization is often misrepresented as a dramatic metaphysical event, an instant of enlightenment that will dissolve all doubts and guarantee perpetual bliss. Contemporary culture throws fuel on that myth with book covers promising overnight transformation and viral videos offering 5-minute fixes. Real self-realization is quieter, more patient, and far more practical. It is a gradual aligning of who you are inside with what you do outside. It's the slow clearing away of confusion, the steady learn and act from a place of clarity rather than habit, fear, or a habit disguised as fear. The mastery part, the phrase self-realization mastery, is not about dominating some mystical domain. It refers to becoming fluent in the language of your own inner life, recognizing patterns, asking better questions, choosing deliberately, and living with a clarity that becomes visible in your relationships, decisions, and sense of purpose. This book is a map and a toolkit. It will not tell you what to want. Wishes and longings are deeply personal and sometimes contradictory. My job is not to replace them, but to help you discover them. We will work together through 10 chapters that move from curiosity to clarity, from habit to intentional action, and from surface-level identity to the deeper, flourishing self. Each chapter is written to be read on its own, but the real power comes from doing the experiments and reflections that follow the ideas. Think of this as a conversation with a curious friend who pushes you kindly and honestly. A common confusion is to equate self-realization with being successful in conventional terms. Money, status, accolades. Those things can happen for people who are self-realized, but they are not the goal. Self-realization is about coherence. Inner values matching outer behavior. It is about the ease that comes when choices no longer have to drag you into conflict with yourself. Imagine waking up and making decisions that feel like the next right step, instead of decisions that only make sense when explained away later. Imagine your energy aligning with your work, your relationships, and even your leisure. That is the practical gift of this journey. You'll see 2 repeated themes in this book. First, self-knowledge matters more than image. Second, practice matters more than belief. You can believe that you are courageous all day long, but if your decisions continue to be shaped by avoidance, the belief is a polite fiction. Conversely, repeated small practices, pause before a reactive email, asking 3 probing questions before agreeing to something, honoring 1 hour of undistracted creativity each week. Build a new operating system. Over time, your habits sculpt your identity. That's how mastery happens. Not by rare heroic acts, but by the accumulation of daily choices. Throughout these pages, I'll share simple frameworks you can use immediately. I will ask you to write short notes, to speak uncomfortable truths out loud, to test assumptions that feel sacred. The goal is to replace confusion with curiosity, stories with data, vague longings with concrete experiments. The biggest enemy of self-realization is narrative inertia, the stories we tell ourselves because they are familiar, even if they are limiting. I'm not creative. I always fail. I don't deserve success. These are stories. They can be revised. That is a liberating news. Identity is not fixed. It is a living conversation you have with yourself. and you can change its tone. Another important point, self-realization is not solitary. It flourishes in contact. You will need honest mirrors, friends, mentors, therapists, coaches, who will reflect back how your actions appear to the world. You will also need solitude, the kind that is not avoidance, but a disciplined space to hear your own thoughts without background noise. The interplay of solitude and community acts like a compass and a map. Both are necessary. Mastery grows faster when you practice in front of others, and when others hold you accountable for living your intentions. There is a pragmatic flow to the book. We begin by clarifying the self, understanding what voice in you is speaking, and which ones are echoes from upbringing, culture, or fear. We'll then look at the architecture of your life, the rituals, environments, and relationships that either support or erode your authenticity. Later chapters move into skills, emotional fluency, focused attention, disciplined rest, and courageous boundaries. We end with integration, how to apply these capacities to work, love, creativity, and contribution, so that realization is not a private glow, but a force that shapes the world around you. I want to offer one reassurance before we begin. You do not need to be broken to start. Many people delay introspection because they imagine a dramatic overhaul is required. You don't have to dismantle your life to construct a more aligned one. Small, consistent changes compound. If you commit to one honest practice from this book and repeat it for a month, you will notice a difference. If you then add another practice, the effects become nonlinear. Mastery is less about radical reinvention and more about thoughtful accumulation. And finally, I will keep a promise. There's a single deceptively simple principle that stitches together practices and insights in this book. A secret, not because it's mysterious, but because it is overlooked. I will reveal in the final chapters, not as a magic pill, but as a lens you can use every day. It has been the hinge for many people who move from drifting to deliberate living. For now, hold a gentle curiosity about the possibility that the life you long for may not require complete rebirth, only a clearer set of choices. If you are reading this now, you have already taken the first step. You recognize the ache and chose inquiry over resignation. That choice matters. Keep that courage close. It will be the quiet companion of this entire book. Turn the page when you are ready. We begin not with pretense, but with honesty, the honest observation of where you are and the patient work of choosing who you will become. Chapter 2, The Map Within. Most of us carry a map stamped into our bones, a rough sketch of who we think we are, what we can do, and what life will allow. That map is useful. It helps us move without reinventing the world at every step. The problem begins when we mistake the sketch for the territory. We follow old lines drawn by childhood, culture, or fear and call it identity. The work of self-realization begins with honest cartography, learning to read the map, find the errors, and redraw the parts that no longer serve you. Knowing yourself is less a single revelation and more an archival project. You gather data, moments when you felt alive, moments when you felt empty, the decisions you regret, the ones that felt right in your bones. You notice recurring patterns. You always say yes to a certain person, or you exit conversations early. You turn effort into avoidance in particular situations. You perform to secure approval rather than pursue meaning. Patterns are the footprint of habit. When you trace them, you learn the shape of your inner world. Start with curiosity. Curiosity is the soft, non-judgmental lens that allows observation without self-attack. When a reaction arises, irritation, withdrawal, a thrill, treat it like a specimen to examine. Ask, what triggered it? Where in my body do I feel it? What story immediately formed in my mind? Most importantly, ask, Is that story serving me? Curiosity produces useful questions because it delays the automatic response of defense. Instead of hiding from your impulses or pretending they don't exist, you attentively collect information. One practical method is to keep a simple log for a month. Record 3 things each day. One moment you felt energized, one moment you felt depleted, and one decision that felt either honest or dishonest. These notes do not need to be polished. The entries are raw data points. After a few weeks, patterns begin to show. Maybe your energizing moments cluster around creative tasks, but not meetings. Perhaps your depletion follows long stretches of passive scrolling. Patterns lead to experiments, small, testable changes you can try to see whether the map adjusts. Language matters. The words you use to describe yourself act like levers that lock your behavior into place. Replace declarative absolutes with provisional observations. Instead of "I'm not creative," try "I notice resistance when I try new artistic things." The first statement shuts a door. The second opens a window. This is not mere positive thinking. It's a technical shift. The brain treats statements differently depending on certainty. Provisional language invites inquiry. Absolute language invites entrenchment. Another powerful lens is to separate roles from essence. We are many things: partner, parent, employee, friend, child of our parents. Roles come with expectations, both internal and external. Essence is a recurring inner tone beneath these roles. Curiosity, compassion, a love of challenge, a desire for order. Roles can change every few years. Essence tends to be steadier. Learning to recognize which parts of you are role-based and which parts are essential prevents you from abandoning your deeper preferences for external validation. Values are North Stars, but often we mistake habits for values. A value like freedom becomes meaningful when it guides trade-offs. A habit like avoid commitment might masquerade as freedom but functionally constrains you. The difference shows up in the choices you make under pressure. To clarify values, imagine your life at 80, looking back. What would you be proud you had prioritized? What would you regret avoiding? This mental time travel cuts through fads and reveals what holds real weight for you. Feedback from others is gold, but it must be used wisely. Ask for specific, behavior-focused input. When I interrupted in the meeting, how did that come across? Avoid vague questions like, "Do I seem confident?" which invite opinions that may be more about the other person than about you. Use the feedback to cross-check your internal map. If several people independently name the same pattern, it's less likely to be distortion and more likely to be a true landmark on your internal map. Emotion is the body's map marker. Emotional reactions point to values, wounds, unmet needs, or latent strengths. Learn the vocabulary of your emotions beyond the usual good/bad. Anger often masks hurt or fear. Shame nods to an unmet belonging need. Boredom can be a signal that your current activity lacks meaning. Naming emotions precisely. I feel impatient and small because my ideal wasn't acknowledged. Turns an amorphous state into specific information you can act on. One of the most efficient ways to know yourself is through small, controlled experiments. If you suspect you avoid risk because of fear of failure, design a low-cost failure and observe the aftermath. If you think you thrive in deep work but are never in that state, schedule 2-hour blocks where you eliminate distractions and see what emerges. Experiments should be simple, reversible, and measurable. The goal is not to overhaul overnight, but to gather evidence that either supports or contradicts your current map. We also have inner critics and inner allies. The critic learns to keep you safe by predicting disapproval. The ally knows how to coax you into your strengths. Pay attention to both voices. but don't give them equal power. The critic's metaphors are often hyperbolic and retrospective. You always mess things up. The ally speaks in pragmatic, encouraging terms. This was hard. Here's what to try next. Teach yourself to query the critic. What are you trying to protect me from? Often, the critic's motives are understandable and compassion diffuses some of its intensity. Finally, make space for complexity. You are not a single thread, but a woven fabric. You may love solitude and also crave connection. You may be ambitious and terrified of judgment. Self-realization does not ask you to simplify yourself into a brand. It asks you to hold multiplicity with clarity. Acceptance without complacency is the posture that allows growth. Accept the parts that are true now. Experiment to change the parts that aren't working, and be patient with the messy middle. The map within is never finished. It gains detail as you pay attention. Each season of life brings new data points. Relationships change, capacities shift, priorities reorder. The practice of self-knowledge is lifelong because life itself is unfolding. The good news is that the skills you build, curiosity, recording evidence, running experiments, seeking precise feedback, transfer across contexts. They are the cartographer's tools. Finish this chapter with a small assignment. Pick one pattern you've noticed recently and design a simple experiment around it. Make it specific. What you will do, when, and how you'll measure it. After the experiment, write what you saw without judgment. Over time, these small experiments will redraw your internal map into something truer and more useful. Not a fixed identity, but a living, responsive guide for the life you intend to lead. Chapter 3, The Inner Compass. Desire is the quiet engine of a meaningful life. It is not the flashy craving that television ads sell, immediate, shallow, quickly satisfied, but the slower, truer longings that nudge you toward projects, people, and places that feel like growth. Yet desire is tricky. It arrives tangled with duty, shame, practicality, and habit. Learning to hear your desires clearly, to tell the difference between what will deepen you and what will only distract you, is one of the most practical acts of self-realization. Most people confuse desire with impulse. An impulse is a reaction, sudden, often emotional, and usually short-lived. Desire is a pattern. Think of impulse as a spark and desire as a slow-burning ember. The ember gives off heat. You can build something with it. Recognizing that difference requires slowing down long enough to notice which internal signals repeat over weeks and months. If the idea of writing a song surfaces whenever you're tired at night for 3 months, that repetition suggests a desire worth exploring. If the urge to buy a gadget flares only after a stressful meeting and disappears the next morning, it's probably impulse. Desire is also frequently politicized by our inner critics. You shouldn't want that. The critic intones, translating cultural or parental rules into a veto, or desires hidden under practicality. I love painting, but I don't have time. These are not always lies, but they are filters that can obscure honest longing. The key is to treat these filters like data, not destiny. Ask them where they come from and whether they still serve you. Some rules are wise. Others are inherited fear wearing a respectable suit. A useful exercise is a desire inventory. Sit with a blank page and divide it into 3 columns. In the first column, write down activities or projects that make you light up when you imagine them, 1 to 2 sentences each. In the second column, list the practical obstacles you imagine: time, money, fear of failure, obligations. In the third column, note 1 tiny, specific first step you can take that costs almost nothing and is reversible. The point of the third column is crucial. It translates longing into action. without requiring a leap of faith. If the desire persists after you take the tiny step, it's likely real. If it fades, you've learned without a catastrophe. Desire and discipline are partners, not opposites. People often think discipline will kill desire, but the opposite is closer to the truth. Discipline provides a structure in which desire can grow. Without limits, desire diffuses into noise. A simple discipline could be to set aside 30 minutes 3 times a week for the tentative pursuit of a chosen longing. Call it practice, not destiny. Practice collapses a mythology around desire. You don't have to make a lifelong commitment on day one. You only have to show up for 30 minutes. Over time, cumulative practice reveals whether the desire was genuine and how it wants to be shaped. Another principle: try to distinguish between intrinsic and extrinsic desire. Intrinsic desire pulls you toward the activity itself. Playing the piano because the sound fills you, mentoring because you enjoy seeing another person grow. Extrinsic desire is motivated by outside rewards, praise, status, money. Neither is inherently bad. Extrinsic motivations can fund and sustain deep pursuits. Problems arise when you confuse the two and persist in extrinsic pursuits while ignoring the intrinsic ones that replenish you. A regular audit, asking which parts of your week feel draining and which parts invigorating, helps reveal the balance. Listen to your body. Desire often registers somatically long before the mind catches up. There's a tightening in the chest when you say, "I must," about something you don't want, and an openness when you say, "I want," to something authentic. Learn those cues. The body is an interpreter trained by experience, and it knows which activities have historically energized you. Noticing where desire lives in the body can also help when the mind is noisy. Take 3 slow breaths and scan your body for signals before making a decision that involves passion, work, or relationships. Fear will always shadow desire. That's normal. Fear is a protective mechanism. It wants to prevent pain. But fear is not a reliable arbiter of value. A useful question to ask when fear arises is, what would trying this cost me? And what would not trying cost me? Often not trying has a long tail of regret and a slow erosion of self-trust. The stakes of staying safe can exceed the discomfort of taking a small risk. Frame experiments so the potential downside is manageable and the upside is meaningful. This is a logic of brave practice. There are social dynamics around desire that matter. Some desires require solitude to be born. Others need sharing to take shape. If your longing is for a creative project, you might need a quiet room and time alone. If your longing is to lead, you'll need feedback and collaborators. Understand which environment your desire needs and arrange it intentionally. People underestimate how much context shapes what we want to pursue. A garden won't grow in the shade. Likewise, a desire won't flourish in the wrong conditions. Commitment language matters. Saying, "I want to try," is different from, "I will do this for 6 weeks." The first is tentative. The second creates space for measurable results. Commitments function like experiments if you keep them time-bound and specific. I will write 3 short paragraphs every Sunday for 6 weeks. After the 6 weeks, evaluate honestly. You have evidence either way. This minimizes the moralization of attempts. Success is data, not a declaration of identity. Lastly, integrate desire into your calendar. If something is important but never scheduled, it will remain a pleasant fantasy. The calendar is a moral tool. What you schedule reveals what you value. Even block scheduling small, consistent windows for emerging desires declares that they matter. Protect those blocks like tiny sacred spaces. Treat them as appointments with your future self. Finish this chapter with a practice. Pick one desire from your inventory and take a micro step this week. Make it measurable and reversible. Write down what you did, what you felt before and after, and one observation about whether the desire grew, shifted, or dissipated. Do this for 4 weeks. At the end, look at the data. Desire is not a mystical sign you wait for. It's a pattern you cultivate through attention, small acts, and the discipline to keep testing. Over months, the pattern clarifies and the ember becomes a steady flame. Chapter 4, The Architecture Practice. If self-realization is a destination, habits and rituals are the roads that take you there. They are the scaffolding that supports intention when the first rush of enthusiasm fades. Most people think of habits as boring repetition or moral obligation, but they are actually the clearest language your inner life uses to tell the world who you are. The question is not simply what habits you have, but which habits are running in the background shaping your identity without your conscious consent. Habits begin small and accumulate quietly. A single 5-minute choice repeated daily becomes a backbone of competence. The tricky part is turning an abstract value, authenticity, courage, clarity, into concrete actions that can actually be practiced. That translation is the work of architecture. You design triggers, what prompts the action, the routine, what you do, and the reward, what makes you repeat it. Without intentional architecture, habits default to convenience, and habit support for whatever version of yourself is most tired or distracted that day. Start with identity-based habits. Instead of saying, I want to read more, rephrase it as, I am the kind of person who reads. Identity language changes how the brain evaluates choices. When faced with decision, your brain asks, which action aligns with the person I believe myself to be? Small identity-affirming actions, 1 page a night, 5 minutes of journaling on waking, stack into a self-image that then biases your future behavior toward consistency. The quickest route to long-term change is to ask, what identity do I want to inhabit, and what tiny, repeatable action expresses that identity? Designing habits means lowering friction for behaviors you want and increasing friction for the ones you don't. If you want to write in the morning, put a notebook on your pillow the night before. If you want to stop doom scrolling at night, charge your phone in another room and leave a book on your bedside table. Small environmental nudges matter more than willpower because willpower is finite. Habit design uses the environment as an ally, not a battleground. Another powerful tactic is habit stacking. Attach a new habit to an existing routine. For example, after you brush your teeth, write 1 sentence of gratitude. After your morning coffee, read 1 page of a book that matters. The existing habit serves as an anchor, reducing the mental load of remembering the new action. Keep the new habit tiny so that it feels doable even on your worst days. Consistency builds identity. Difficulty can be introduced later once the pattern is embedded. Rituals deserve special attention because they add meaning to habit. A ritual is a habit with intentionality and symbolic form attached. It signals the brain that something important is happening. A 5-minute centering ritual before work. Lighting a candle, breathing for 5 breaths, stating a single intention converts the mundane into the meaningful. Rituals don't have to be mystical. Their power is psychological. They create boundaries and mark transitions, which are especially useful in modern lives where contexts bleed into one another and attention fragments. Measurement matters, but keep it friendly. People either avoid measurement entirely or weaponize it into perfectionism. Choose a tracking method that gives you useful feedback without moralizing. A simple habit tracker with smiley faces, a calendar with excess for days you showed up, or a weekly note with 1 sentence about progress is enough. The real purpose of tracking is to produce data. When did you manage to stick? When did you falter? What patterns emerge? Use that data to adjust your design, not to shame yourself. Accountability amplifies consistency. Telling a friend, joining a small group, or making a public promise increases the cost of slipping. But authorization matters. Choose accountability that feels supportive rather than punitive. The best accountability setups invite compassion and curiosity, a weekly check-in that asks what worked this week, rather than why did you fail? Because curiosity produces improvement while judgment produces avoidance. Beware of the all-or-nothing trap. Many people imagine that transformation requires radical change, a full schedule rewrite, a complete diet overhaul, or a social cleanse. These decisions carry inertia and resistance. Instead, favor micro-experiments that are reversible and measurable. Commit to a 30-day trial of a single habit at a scale you can sustain on low energy. Treat it as an experiment, not a moral trial. At the end of the month, evaluate honestly. Did this habit increase your energy, clarity, or sense of meaning? If yes, keep it. If not, iterate or let it go. The role of failure in habit work is often misunderstood. Failure is feedback, not identity. You will miss days. You will break streaks. What matters is what you do afterward. The best response is immediate curiosity. What triggered the miss? Was it a scheduling conflict, an emotional low, or a design flaw? Fix the design rather than double down on willpower. Replace the harsh internal monologue with a practical question. How can I reduce friction for next time? Periodic renewal keeps rituals alive. Habits that once served you may become rote or even counterproductive. Schedule a quarterly review where you ask, which practices feel alive, which feel mechanical, which secretly serve avoidance. This honesty prevents rituals from calcifying into superstition. Sometimes the correct move is to retire a ritual. Other times a move is to deepen it. Integration is the final step. Building habits that cascade into other areas of life. Keystone habits, like consistent sleep, daily movement, or weekly reflection, have outsized effects because they regulate energy, mood, and cognitive capacity. Identify one keystone habit that will likely improve multiple areas and invest in its architecture first. Often, improving one keystone habit unlocks progress elsewhere because capacity and clarity expand. Practice with compassion. Habits are not about proving worth. They are about building capacity. Speak to yourself as a coach would, clear, kind, and strategic. Celebrate small wins. Notice marginal gains. Over time, the cumulative effect of tiny, well-designed practices alters your internal narrative. You stop relying on heroic motivation and instead create a stable baseline of competence. That baseline is what makes the deeper work of self-realization possible. You no longer need to beg yourself to show up because your environment, rituals, and identity do much of the work. Finish this chapter with a practical assignment. Pick one identity you want to inhabit for the coming month. For example, I am someone who creates, or I am someone who rests well. Choose one tiny habit that expresses that identity. Design a trigger, a routine under 5 minutes, and a small reward. Put on your calendar and track it daily for 30 days. At the end of the month, write one paragraph about what changed inside you. Habits are the architecture of character. Build them with intention, simplicity, and patience. Chapter 5, Emotional Fluency. Emotions are not obstacles to self-realization. They are data. Yet most of us treat them either as enemies to be controlled or as weather to be endured. Emotional fluency is the ability to read, name, and use your feelings as reliable information rather than letting them hijack decisions or hide in subtle sabotage. When you can move with your emotions instead of being moved by them, choices become clearer, relationships deepen, and your inner life becomes a resource rather than a hazard. Begin with the simple truth that emotions are not commands. A shame or a rage that arrives in a flash does not mean you must act on it. Emotions are signals shaped by past experience, current context, and bodily state. They tell you about value, threat, longing, or loss, but they rarely arrive with complete instruction manual. Your job is to translate the signal into useful information and then decide. That translation starts with naming. Naming an emotion precisely is surprisingly powerful. Most people default to "I feel bad" or "I feel upset," which lumps many distinct states into a single gray soup. Practice expanding your emotional vocabulary. Replace angry sometimes with hurt, embarrassed, frustrated, or protective. Replace sad with disappointed, lonely, or grieving. Specific names reduce the drama and increase clarity. When you can say, "I feel anxious because I'm about to present and I'm afraid of being judged," you move from vague distress to a clear problem you can address. Prepare differently, practice a grounding routine, or ask for a smaller audience first. Notice the body. Emotions live in the body long before the mind can narrate them. Tightness in the throat, a sinking in the gut, a heat behind the eyes. These are the first reporters. Create a short habit of scanning your body when you feel a spike. Take 3 slow breaths. Tune into where sensation is strongest and ask what that sensation might be signaling. This somatic attention is not spiritual bypass. It's practical. It gives you time in a different lens, often calming the immediate reactivity and allowing the prefrontal cortex space to act. Practice the pause. The pause is the basic tool for emotional regulation. It need not be long. Even a few deep breaths, a 5-second count, or a quick step away from the keyboard will change the trajectory of many emotional moments. Pauses introduce choice. They convert reactive scripts into experiments. Instead of sending the email that lashes back, you pause and reframe. Instead of storming out, you pause and choose to return in 10 minutes. The pause trains you to test impulse against intention. Language shapes emotion. Try saying your experience aloud in this form. "I feel X because Y." This structure forces causal thinking and reduces a tendency to blame others or yourself without clarity. It also makes your internal experience easier to communicate to others. In relationships, this simple formulation, "I feel hurt because I thought you weren't listening," invites a specific conversation. It avoids the accusatory, diffuse critiques that often lead to defensiveness and escalation. Manage intensity with small practices. When emotion feels overwhelming, use immediate low-risk strategies. Change posture, alter breathing, move your body, splash water on your face, or step into fresh air. These actions shift physiology and often reduce the immediate charge. For longer-term work, cultivate practices that expand your baseline capacity. Regular sleep, movement, moderation of stimulants, and consistent reflection. Emotional fluency is less about suppressing spikes and more about building a resilient baseline that reduces their frequency and intensity. Curiosity is a kinder alternative to judgment. When a painful emotion arises, ask questions that are investigative rather than punitive. When else have I felt something like this? What does this impulse want me to protect or obtain? Is this pattern related to a past story? Curiosity dissolves the moral fog that makes emotions feel like evidence of character flaws. Instead, it turns them into problems to be solved and curiosities to be explored. Learn the grammar of escalation. Emotions rarely jump from 0 to max without a path. There are predictable sequences, a trigger, an interpretive story, a bodily reaction, an impulse to act, and then an action. If you know the sequence, you can intervene earlier. For example, if you recognize that in tense meetings you tell yourself a story of incompetence within the first 30 seconds, you can pre-plan a counterstory or a breathing anchor to reset the loop. That pre-planning is the art of using emotional patterns against themselves. Boundaries are a structural tool for emotion. When you cannot control another person's behavior, you can control your proximity, commitments, and the costs you accept. Saying no, asking for time, or negotiating expectations are practical ways to prevent chronic resentment and depletion. Boundaries are not punishments. They are calibrations that preserve energy for the work that matters. When you set them clearly and kindly, you reduce the ambient emotional noise that drains attention. Practice empathetic listening. Emotions are social beasts. They change when witnessed. When someone angrily complains or silently withdraws, listening with presence, not problem solving, often diffuses the intensity. Reflect back what you hear. It sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed because of X. This kind of feedback helps others label their feelings and think through them more clearly. It also trains you to be a steady mirror, which in turn improves your own emotional balance. Don't skip grief. Life accumulates small losses and big ones. Grief is not only for catastrophic, it is the natural companion to change. Allowing yourself to grieve, giving it words, time, and ritual, prevents it from resurfacing as irritability, numbness, or passive withdrawal. Simple rituals, a written letter, a walk in a meaningful place, a designated quiet evening, give grief both legitimacy and a container. Finally, turn emotion into meaning by asking constructive, so what questions? When a recurring feeling appears, explore its invitation. What is this emotion asking me to notice or change? If anger returns often at work, perhaps it signals unmet standards or misalignment between role and values. If loneliness recurs even in company, maybe it signals a need for deeper conversation rather than more surface interactions. Emotions are rarely the problem. They are messengers pointing to decisions or conditions that deserve attention. Finish this chapter with a short experiment. For 1 week, carry a small notebook or use a notes app. Whenever you experience a significant emotion, one that feels big enough to affect your behavior, write the time, the trigger, the physical sensations, the label you can give it, try for specificity, and one possible invitation emotion carries, what it might be asking you to do or notice. At the end of each day, read the entries and write one sentence about any pattern you see. After 7 days, pick one pattern and design a single, small intervention to test for the next 2 weeks. A pause practice, a breathing routine, a boundary, or a conversation. Treat this as an experiment, not a moral trial. Emotional fluency grows with attention, naming, and repeated small interventions. Over time, feelings become a language you can understand, and a compass that reliably guides the life you are choosing. Chapter 6, The Discipline of Attention. Attention is the currency of meaning. You can have interesting ideas, noble intentions, and carefully written plans, but if your attention flits away at the moment of execution, those gifts never compound. The modern world is built to steal focus. Notifications, endless scroll, fragmented work, and polite but persistent social demands. Learning to steward your attention is not ascetic deprivation. It is the essential skill of anyone who wants their inner life and outer actions to line up. Attention shapes what grows in your mind the way sunlight shapes what grows in a garden. Begin by recognizing attention as a resource with limits. We are not defective when we lose focus. We are biological beings with limited reservoirs of sustained concentration. The mistake is treating willpower as an infinite reservoir and berating ourselves when it runs low. Better strategy: manage the resource. Use high-energy windows for demanding tasks and low-energy windows for small, restorative practices. Mapping your natural rhythms, when you're sharpest when you slow down, is an early piece of architecture for a focused life. Design your environment to support attention. The environment matters more than the lump of motivation you carry into it. If you want to write, create a writing place that signals work. A particular chair, a clean desk, a timer, or a notebook on the right side of the table. Remove immediate distractions. Silence notifications. Put your phone in another room and close and use tabs. Make the path of least resistance align with the behavior you want. When your environment nudges you toward attention, you use less willpower and get better results more reliably. Use time blocks and boundaries. A calendar that only holds meetings and obligations will never make room for depth. Schedule blocks specifically for focused work, not as aspirational placeholders, but as actual appointments you defend. Treat these appointments with the same seriousness you would a meeting with an important client. During these blocks, commit to one priority. Decide in advance what good enough looks like for the session, so you don't drift into perfectionism or task hopping. When the block ends, close the work with a clean stop. Note what remains and when you'll return to it. The stop ritual preserves energy and prevents mental residue from bleeding into the rest of your day. Practice single tasking like a muscle. Humans are not built to multitask. We switch tasks, which incurs cognitive cost. When you open your email in the middle of a writing session, you pay a price each time you reorient. Instead, set rules. No email during focus blocks, no meetings back-to-back without a 10-minute buffer, no social media until a certain time. These rules are not more restrictions. They are functional guardrails that protect the architecture of your attention. Learn to use time constraints as sharpening tools. Parkinson's law, work expand to fill the available time, is real. If you give yourself 4 hours for a task that genuinely needs 1, you will usually create complexity where none is required. Set a strict, realistic time box and force yourself to produce within it. The constraint encourages decisive action, prioritization, and creativity. Over time, time boxing trains you to make faster, better judgments about what matters. Micro rest is part of the skill set. Attention wanes predictably. It is not a failure, but rhythm. Work and focus bursts. For many people, 50 to 90 minutes of concentrated effort followed by 10 to 20 minutes of rest works well, and experiment to find your cadence. During rest, step away from screens, move your body, look at something distant, or breathe. These are not wasted minutes. They are investments that renew capacity. The goal is sustainable focus, not heroic sprints that burn out quickly. Guard the threshold of your day. The first 30 minutes after waking and the last 30 before sleep are disproportionately powerful because they shape cognitive tone. Create a morning ritual that aligns attention, perhaps a short movement, a 5-minute review of the day's priority, or a journaling prompt that clarifies what matters. Avoid reaching for your phone the instant you open your eyes. That habit hands your earliest attention to other people's priorities. Similarly, create an evening practice that clears your head and signals the brain it's time to repair. A short reflection, a note of one success, and a plan for tomorrow's first priority. Interruptions are negotiable. Some interruptions are urgent and unavoidable. Many are habitual cries for social proximity or novelty. Make polite defaults. Set an auto-reply for focus blocks. Use status settings that explain when you'll be available and teach colleagues and loved ones what your attention boundaries look like. When you do allow interruptions, decide intentionally whether to accept them in the moment or to defer. Deferral is a powerful tool. I want to give this my attention. Can we talk at 3 p.m.? Preserves both attention and relationship. Cultivate attention through simple practices. Meditation is not the only way. Any discipline that trains sustained focus helps. Reading a book without interruption, practicing a craft, working on a puzzle, or playing an instrument are all focus training. The key is repeated exposure to sustained attention without rescue by distraction. Start small, 5 minutes of seated attention per day, and build gradually. Like any muscle, attention strengthens with consistent, patient practice. Learn to notice the quality of your attention. Are you skimming superficially through the world, or are you present and engaged? The quality of attention affects relationships as much as tasks. When you listen to another person with full attention, you shape a more intimate, cooperative interaction. Practice present in conversation. Brief pauses before responding. Questions that invite elaboration, and posture that signals undivided attention. Presence is a gift you can give others and yourself, and it improves both understanding and connection. Be strategic about shallow work. Not all tasks require deep attention, and some must be done. Batch shallow tasks together. Email triage, administrative chores, quick calls into specific windows. Batching reduces context switching and protects deeper periods for the work that matters. Honor the value of shallow work without letting it masquerade as productivity. Quantity of busyness is not the same as quality of impact. Finally, remember attention is also a moral choice. What you give your mind determines what you become. Feeding your attention to constant outrage, sensationalism, or hollow novelty shapes a mind built for distraction. Instead, steward attention toward things that align with your values, projects that stretch you, relationships that nourish you, and ideas that expand your perspective. Over months and years, attention accumulates into habit, and habits become identity. Finish this chapter with a practical experiment. For the next 2 weeks, schedule 2 daily focus blocks of at least 40 minutes, 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. During these blocks, close all unrelated tabs, silence your phone, and work on a single priority. After each block, write 1 sentence about what you accomplished and 1 sentence about how your attention felt. At the end of 2 weeks, review the notes and observe changes. Are you getting more done? Are you less reactive? Adjust the length and timing based on what you learn. Attention is not a fixed trait. It is an art you cultivate with design, discipline, and small, steady practices. Chapter 7, Courageous Action. Ideas, clarity, and careful practice are precious, but they stay abstract unless acted upon. Courageous action is a bridge between inner discovery and real-world change. It's a habit of choosing the signal over the noise, the long-term value over immediate comfort. Courage is not an absence of fear. It is a decision to move despite fear. It is small and mundane as often as it is dramatic. The person who speaks up to correct a misleading idea in a meeting, who apologizes first, who asks for what they need, who finishes a project even when confidence lags. These are everyday acts of courage that reshape identity and circumstance. First, notice how we mythologize courage. Culture paints courage as a single heroic leap, a resignation letter flashed dramatically on a social feed, a sudden move across a continent, a viral confrontation. Those things can be courageous, but they're exceptions, not templates. More common and more consequential are the cumulative small acts that alter our trajectory, consistent discomfort practiced until it becomes normal. Think of courage as a muscle built by incremental load. You don't bench press your whole life on day one. You add tenacity rep by rep. Start by recalibrating how you define risk and failure. Many people avoid action because they overestimate the negative consequences of trying and underestimate the cost of not trying. Ask concrete questions. What is the worst plausible outcome? How reversible is it? What is the realistic probability of catastrophe? Often the worst case is survivable, and the real harm of inaction is long-term. The slow erosion of self-trust, the accumulation of small regrets, the quiet shrinking of possibility. Reframing risk this way turns nebulous fear into a manageable equation and creates permission to test. Practice low-stakes courage. Design experiments where failure carries small cost but valuable information. If you want to practice speaking up, commit to one short, data-focused comment in the next meeting. If you want to improve a relationship, say one honest sentence, even if it trembles. If you want to create a portfolio, publish one tiny piece online, and treat the response as data, not destiny. The purpose is not to prove you're already fearless. It's to train the nervous system to handle discomfort and collect evidence that the world will often bend, not break, when you act. Use commitment devices to convert intention into action. Public promises, written contracts with trusted friends, or financial stakes can tilt the balance toward follow-through. Humans respond to deadlines and social pressure more reliably than to private resolutions. The device doesn't have to be punitive. It can be celebratory, promise a small reward for consistent effort, or create a low-cost penalty for skipping. The structural trick is to change the payoff landscape so that the brave choice becomes a rational one. Language matters when you act. Replace vague intentions with crisp commitments. I will ask for a raise is different from I want to ask for a raise someday. The former ties an action to time and context. The latter leaves room for postponement. Make commitments time-bound and specific. On Tuesday at 2 p.m., I will schedule a 15-minute meeting with my manager to discuss compensation. This clarity removes the fog where procrastination hides. Courage thrives on preparation. People often imagine courage as impulsive. In reality, most courageous actions are prepared by thought, rehearsal, and contingency planning. If you're nervous about a difficult conversation, script the first 30 seconds, anticipate objections, and plan a calm exit strategy. Rehearsal reduces fear because it reduces the unknown. Preparation is not about eliminating risk. It is about improving your odds and preserving composure under pressure. Embrace the role of curiosity in brave action. When fear surfaces, ask investigative questions instead of moral judgments. What am I afraid will happen? Where does that story come from? What would I need to test to know if it's true? Curiosity converts fear from a stop sign into a diagnostic instrument. It reduces the drama and increases the chance that you'll act with nuance rather than reactivity. Expect social friction and plan for it. Courage often disrupts the status quo, and that can provoke pushback even when your motives are good. People invested in the current order may feel threatened. Anticipate discomfort. Prepare to explain your reasons clearly, to listen generously to objections, and to hold your boundaries without escalation. When you expect friction, it stops surprising you and you can respond with strategy rather than shock. Cultivate moral clarity as fuel for action. Courage is easier when you can link an action to a clear value. If speaking up in a meeting serves truth and the quality of work, it becomes more than self-assertion. It's a service to the group. When your actions are tethered to a value, integrity, care, service, it's easier to tolerate short-term discomfort because the move aligns with a larger narrative about who you want to be. This is the integration of inner compass with outer behavior. Practice the art of repair. Courage sometimes results in missteps, a tone that was harsher than intended, a request poorly timed, a promise you can't keep. The important skill is not to avoid errors at all costs, but to repair them quickly and honestly. Apologize without over-explaining correct course, and use the event as a learning moment. Repair attains dignity and models resilience. It signals that courage and humility can coexist. Notice the feedback loop between action and identity. Each brave thing you do slightly alters your self-story. I am someone who acts on my priorities. I am someone who speaks honestly. Over time, these micro-updates aggregate into a more robust identity that makes future action easier. The aim is to stack behaviors that support the person you want to become, not to validate a pre-existing image of invulnerability. Don't mistake perseverance for stubbornness. Courage includes a wisdom to stop when a path is clearly wrong. Persistence matters when the goal is aligned and progress is possible. Stubbornness persists when evidence suggests recalibration. Build feedback points into your courageous experiments. A 3-week check-in, a measurable milestone, or external input. Use these to decide whether to continue, pivot, or stop. Courage without reflection risks becoming pride. Finally, connect courageous action to community. Courage practiced in isolation feels lonelier and riskier. Share your experiments with trusted people, celebrate brave attempts, and create culture where small acts of courage are normalized. When groups model imperfect boldness, they lower the cost of action for others. Community multiplies courage by turning solitary risk into shared practice. Finish this chapter with a simple regimen. Choose one domain where you've been avoiding action, a conversation, a creative project, a professional step. Design a 30-day plan with 3 micro-actions spaced across the month. A preparatory step this week, a low-stakes public test in week 2, and a committed action in week 4. Make each action specific, reversible, and measurable. At the end of 30 days, reflect on what changed in the situation and what changed in you. Courage is not an event. It is a trajectory shaped by repeatable choices. Chapter 8. The Mirrors of Relationship. We often think of self-realization as a private progress, an inner alignment we polish in solitude and then carry out into the world. That's only half the story. Relationships are not distractions from the work of becoming. They are the laboratory where your inner changes are tested, refined, and made real. Other people act like mirrors. They show you blind spots, amplify habits, and reveal which parts of your identity are authentic versus performative. If you ignore these mirrors, you'll remain surprised by recurring conflicts and bewildered by why change in isolation doesn't stick. Begin with the simple premise that relationships are systems, not singular events. A single argument or a single kind word is data, but the pattern of interactions is the deep signal. Patterns reveal roles we fall into: caretaker, rescuer, avoider, corrector, peacemaker. These roles are not inherently moral labels. They're strategies that once served a function. When you notice a recurring role you play, ask what it gives you and what it costs you. The cost might be hidden resentment, exhaustion, diminished creativity, while the perceived gain is often stability or approval. Self-realization in relationship means shifting from reactive roles toward chosen ways of engaging that align with your values and energy. Honesty with yourself about relational needs is essential. Many people list needs for independence, connection, productivity, or reassurance, but then expect others to guess which need is active and how to meet it. That is an unfair and often futile expectation. Par maturity is translating internal states into requests others can hear and act on. Saying, "I need 15 minutes alone after I get home," is not coldness, it's calibration. Clear requests reduce the load of guessing and prevent resentment from accumulating under the polite surface of obligation. Feedback is a gold mine if you handle it well. Most feedback is clumsy. Some of it is useful. Learn to tease apart the elements. What is the specific behavior mentioned? What is the emotional effect on the other person? What, if any, is the Gestalt story that frames the feedback? Ask clarifying questions rather than defensively explaining. For example, if a friend says, "You never listen," ask for a concrete instance and what would look different. Specificity makes change actionable. Also, practice eliciting feedback from trusted people on specific behaviors you want to test. Your interrupting in meetings, your tone when stressed, your follow-through on promises. Collective data trumps private guesswork. Boundaries are relational tools that preserve the possibility of generosity. People sometimes fear boundaries because they imagine they are harsh or unloving. In truth, boundaries create safety and clarity. A boundary is simply a statement about what you can take on and under what conditions. "I can't take on this project this month without compromising my family time," is both truthful and respectful. Boundaries are not ultimatums. They are calibrations that allow relationships to continue without erosion. Practice stating small, practical boundaries and observe how the relationship changes. Often, clarity fosters more genuine connection, not less. Vulnerability is the grease for relational machinery. It's tempting to hide uncertainty, particularly once you've acquired some competence in the world, but hiding corrodes intimacy. Vulnerability does not mean oversharing. It means offering a piece of your inner reality that invites the other to respond in kind. A short, honest phrase, "I'm nervous about this meeting and would appreciate your input," signals trust and often gets you the help you need. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is a strategic transparency that creates reciprocity and deepens ties. Conflict is inevitable and useful if handled with structure. People assume conflict is a sign of failure. Often it is the engine for growth. The key is how you manage escalation and repair. Agree on a few basic rules for tough conversations. Use I language. Limit the length of the conversation to avoid rumination. Take breaks when intensity spikes, and always close with a plan for repair. Repair is essential because unresolved conflict accumulates into erosion. A quick, specific apology and a plan to change behavior do more to restore trust than rhetorical defenses or long explanations. Notice who amplifies your best self and who triggers your worst self. Some relationships are nourishing, others are draining. That doesn't make the draining relationships inherently bad. Sometimes they are necessary for short seasons, but it does mean you should be intentional about how much bandwidth you give them. Invest energy in relationships that encourage your values, give honest feedback, and hold you accountable with generosity. Practice pruning social obligations that consistently sap rather than nourish. Social pruning is not mean. It is a form of stewardship of your time and energy. Create shared practices that deepen connection. Rituals, weekly walks, a short end-of-day check-in, a monthly feedback session. Translate intention into habit. Rituals lower friction and create predictable space for intimacy, curiosity, and accountability. They also serve as early warning systems. The rhythm of a weekly check-in will reveal drift in priorities before small resentments calcify. Cultivate simple, repeatable practices that fit the rhythm of the relationship rather than spectacular, rare events that give a false sense of closeness. There's a broader civic dimension to relationship work. The skills you practice in intimate relationships, listening, asking clarifying questions, staying curious under stress, repairing quickly, scale to groups, teams, and communities. Practice generosity and precise boundaries reduce polarization because they replace projection with curiosity. Think of relational competence as both personal flourishing and public contribution. The way you hold yourself in small circles ripples into larger social fields. Practice the art of appreciative inquiry. People often focus exclusively on problems, what's wrong, what to fix. Balance that by asking what's working and why. In relationships, acknowledging strengths cultivates goodwill and provides a scaffold for change. Tell someone what they do that matters to you and be specific. This isn't flattery. It's a corrective to the negativity bias that poisons many interactions. Habitual acknowledgement builds psychological safety, which in turn makes courageous action and honest feedback possible. Finally, remember that relationships are dynamic. Long-term bonds change shape as seasons of life shift. Roles that once fit may need renegotiation. Approach relationships as iterative projects. Revisit agreements, reallocate responsibilities, and refresh rituals periodically. A quarterly relational check-in, simple, short, and specific, avoids a slow drift that turns partners, friends, or colleagues into strangers with a history. Treating relationships as living systems keeps them adaptive and aligned with who you are becoming. Finish this chapter with a relational experiment. Choose one relationship where you want more clarity or depth. For 2 weeks, practice a 3-part regimen. First, add a short appreciative statement once per week. One sentence about something the other did that mattered. Second, at the start of a tense interaction, take a 5-second pause and say, "I want to understand. Can you tell me what you noticed?" Third, set one small boundary you can uphold, a time, a role, or a topic. After 2 weeks, reflect in one page. What shifted in the relationship? What felt risky? What felt nourishing? And what next step feels important? Use those notes to decide whether to deepen the practice, iterate it, or let it rest. Relationships are mirrors. Use them intentionally to accelerate what you're trying to become. Chapter 9, From Realization to Contribution. Self-realization is not an island. It is a growing supply of internal clarity, energy, and choice that eventually wants to be spent. Not wasted on compulsions or petty dramas, but invested in things that enlarge both your life and the lives around you. This chapter is about that transition, how to take the private work you've been doing, the habits, the attention, the emotional fluency, the small courageous acts, and use it to make a real contribution. Contribution doesn't mean you must save the world. It means arranging your life so that what you give away is meaningful, sustainable, and aligned with who you are becoming. Begin with integration. Integration is more than collection. It is synthesis. You practice noticing patterns, adjusting habits, and experimenting with courage. Integration asks, how do these capacities fit together in daily life so that your choices reliably reflect your values? The test of integration is not perfect behavior, but coherence under pressure. When deadlines tighten, fatigue arrives, or people push against your boundaries, which default shows up. If old habits of avoidance or people-pleasing creep back, your integration needs shoring. Integration requires systems, rituals that anchor you, habits that reinforce identity, and simple rules that protect your priorities. Design those systems with the same care you use for individual habits. Make them tiny, reliable, and suited to the seasons of your life. Next, think about scope. Contribution comes in many sizes. There are public-scale contributions, building an organization, writing a book that reaches thousands, launching a social project, and intimate-scale contributions, being a present parent, a steady friend, or a thoughtfully engaged neighbor. Both matter. A life that balances personal growth with a rhythm of giving becomes richer because action feeds meaning, and meaning fuels further growth. Don't let grandiosity be the only measure of impact. Often the smallest consistent acts produce the deepest echoes. a teacher who listens, a colleague who speaks truth with care, a daily practice that improves the quality of someone else's life. Align contribution with competence and joy. The most sustainable contributions sit at the intersection of what you can do well and what you enjoy doing. This overlap is pragmatic wisdom. You'll give more and burn out less when you're offering users strengths and lights you up. If you're unsure where that overlap sits, run small experiments. Volunteer a tiny version of the work you imagine doing. Mentor one person for a month. Write an article and see what feels alive. Use feedback to refine both the form and scale of your contribution. The goal is not perfection. It is a practice loop. Try, learn, adjust, repeat. Make generosity systemic. Generosity is more reliable when it's built into your life's architecture. Schedule time for giving away you schedule work. Set aside an hour a week to respond to ments, a monthly date to check on elderly neighbors, or a yearly gift to a cause that matters to you. Financial generosity benefits from the same approach. Automate a small recurring donation rather than occasional guilt-driven gestures. When generosity is systematized, it becomes part of identity rather than an ad hoc virtue performed when convenience allows. Teach what you are learning. One of the fastest ways to deepen mastery is to teach. Explaining a practice to another person forces clarity, and the questions you receive often reveal blind spots. Teaching doesn't require credentials. It requires humility and the willingness to share what helps you. Start small. Offer a short workshop, lead a reading group, or mentor someone for a brief period. Teaching is also a form of contribution, because each time you show someone a path, you multiply the capacity of the ecosystem you inhabit. Measure impact kindly. If you're building something with broader ambitions, use metrics to guide, not to define, your choices. Numbers are helpful when they connect to real human outcomes. Track simple leading indicators. How many people showed up, how many responded, what feedback you received, and a few lagging indicators: sustained behavior change, reported satisfaction. Avoid letting metrics become a moral scorecard. Use them to learn and to course correct. Often the most meaningful results are qualitative. A single email that says, "This helped me," a gesture that repeatedly changes someone's day. Hold both kinds of evidence. Protect the supply. Giving requires capacity. If your generosity consistently comes from depletion, it becomes brittle and eventually collapses. Protect the sources of your energy. Sleep, regular movement, restorative relationships, and creative time. Think of these as maintenance for the engine of contribution. When you neglect them, you risk reactive generosity, big bursts followed by collapse, or the slow, resentful giving that erodes goodwill. Build margins into your life, so giving can be steady rather than heroic. Practice ethical contribution. Contribution has moral contours. Consider who benefits, who pays the hidden costs, and whether your actions respect autonomy. The temptation to rescue can be strong. You see a problem, you rush in with your solution, and you accidentally remove agency from people you intend to help. Sustainable contribution often means listening first, offering options, and collaborating rather than imposing. Ask, does this uplift the people affected? Does it create dependency or capacity? Let ethical questions guide design as much as enthusiasm does. Scale with people, not by doing everything alone. If your contribution grows, learn to delegate, to recruit people who complement your strengths, and to build simple processes that preserve quality without your micromanagement. Leadership here is not about ego, it's stewardship. The aim is to multiply impact while maintaining integrity. Invest in a few trustworthy relationships that can carry parts of the work, and create feedback loops that keep the project aligned with its core values. Celebrate small wins. Contribution is often a long arc with sparse fireworks. Without celebration, steady giving can feel like duty alone. Create rituals to mark progress. A small team dinner after a milestone, a personal note to someone who helped, or a private reflection on a job well done. Celebration reinforces a behavior and nourishes a community that sustains the work. Prepare for mismatch and critique. All contribution invites outside judgment. Some people will misunderstand your motives. Some will offer constructive correction. Expect it. Use critique as data. Filter what's useful, discard what's merely noise, and maintain clarity about intentions. Mismatch between expectation and outcome is common when you try new forms of contribution. Lean into humility, update your models, and pivot where necessary. Finally, consider legacy as a living question, not a deadline. Legacy is not a single trophy to be won at the end of life. It's a pattern of effects that continue after you step back. Think about the structures, relationships, and cultural habits you're cultivating that will outlast your direct involvement. Mentor successors, document processes, and build simple habits in your community that can continue without your constant presence. Legacy is created by repeatable systems, not heroics. Finish this chapter with a practical assignment. Choose one small form of contribution you can sustain for 3 months. Teaching a short course, mentoring one person, volunteering an hour weekly, or creating a monthly essay. Define the commitment clearly: what, when, how much. Protect the energy needed to sustain it. And decide on 2 indicators you will use to judge whether to continue after 3 months. One quantitative, one qualitative. At the end of the period, reflect. Did this practice enlarge you or deplete you? Did it help others in a way that mattered? Use those answers to refine, scale, or stop. Contribution is a fertile ground where self-realization becomes a public good, and where the life you shape honors both who you are and who you can help others become. Conclusion: the ongoing craft of becoming. Self-realization is often imagined as a destination. Some moment of clarity where everything finally aligns, your doubts fall silent, and you step into life with perfect certainty. But the truth is quieter, more human, and far more practical. Self-realization is a craft, a lifelong one, a set of habits, questions, and experiments that evolve with every season of your life. You don't arrive at a final version of yourself. You continuously refine who you are becoming. The work you've done throughout these chapters, building awareness, practicing emotional fluency, cultivating discipline, exploring freedom, testing boundaries, engaging with relationships, and stepping into contribution, is not a checklist. It's a toolkit. Some tools will be vital in one stage of your life and unnecessary in another. Some practices will feel easy now but challenging later. That's the nature of human development. It loops, spirals, deepens. You will revisit the same lessons with new eyes and discover that the work never really ends. It just changes texture. The most important takeaway is that self-realization begins with honest contact with your inner world, but must eventually extend outward into your actions, behaviors, and relationships. Awareness without application becomes self-absorption. Action without awareness becomes compulsive. The synthesis of the two, intentional action grounded in clarity, is where your life expands. You also learn that growth is both personal and relational. No one transforms alone. Every relationship around you contains clues, mirrors, challenges, and invitations. Pay attention to how others respond to your evolution. Some will celebrate it, some will resist it, and some will quietly drift away. None of that is failure. It's the natural reorganization that occurs when a person becomes more aligned and less apologetic about who they truly are. Let the relationships that nourish you deepen, and let the ones that drain you fade without hostility. Another essential principle is rhythm. Realization has its seasons. Periods of intense effort, periods of confusion, periods of rest, periods of integration. Respect these rhythms. You can't sustain constant transformation, just as you can't sustain constant output. Build pauses into your growth the way musicians build silence into music. Often, the deepest insights surface not during effort, but during rest, when the mind loosens its grip and truth rises unforced. Perhaps the quiet revelation running through all chapters is this: your life is shaped less by dramatic breakthroughs and more by small, consistent adjustments. You become who you are through daily choices. What you attend to, what you tolerate, what you practice, what you refuse, what you nurture. Grand visions inspire, but tiny, boring habits transform. If you want a different life, change the patterns you repeat, not the goals you fantasize about. Contribution, too, is part of self-realization's architecture. As your inner world becomes more stable, you naturally generate surplus energy, clarity, skill, compassion, creativity. The question then shifts from who am I becoming to what can I offer? You don't need to change millions of lives to matter. Touching one life with intention, presence, or guidance is already a significant form of meaning-making. Your contribution doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be real. In the end, mastery of self-realization is about choosing the person you want to be every single day. Not in a rigid, performative way, but in a fluid, adaptive, honest way. It's choosing courage over comfort, clarity over confusion, responsibility over blame, curiosity over defensiveness, steady practice over dramatic effort, and above all, it's choosing to keep going, even when progress is invisible, even when setbacks sting, even when old patterns try to reclaim you. Before closing this book, consider making a simple contract with yourself. Not a dramatic vow, but a practical promise that you will stay awake to your life, that you will notice when you drift, that you will return when you wander, that you will refine when you stagnate, and that you will honor the person you are becoming, even when the world around you does not yet recognize that version. The journey of self-realization is not about achieving perfection. It's about pursuing wholeness, patiently, honestly, and consistently. And if you keep walking, keep questioning, keep choosing presence over autopilot, you'll discover something remarkable. You don't just create a better life. You create a better self capable of carrying that life with grace. Your work continues after this final page. Your next chapter isn't written here. It's written in your daily decisions. And that is where the true mastery begins.